I'm laying on my back in that chair.
Yeah, Woofy.
Yeah.
Woofy and I.
I don't have to leave.
This is your kids'
Why, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Three voices at once.
Same to you there, my friend, to me.
Harrison, 5 years later.
No preparation on introduction here, so I think I might turn it over to Richard and Phyllis here to talk a little bit about getting back on track for what we were discussing earlier over at church in the basement. Is that possible?
I thought that was an amazing presentation at the church, and then the response and just being aware of the whole body of people here in light of what we were talking about 5 years ago, that is Fred and Margaret, and their proliferation, their foundation in principles, but also proliferation in children who carry that in various ways. I was just struck looking around at Chris and Nicholas and Joel going into international relations. Lorena going at, doing work with Down syndrome people. All the different people go, Cassandra maybe international agriculture, or at least looking after cows. And Marie and Steve, and what everybody's doing, and how that speaks those principles in such differentiated ways now, in such a distribution. I thought if we continued that kind of discussion or sharing from that, it really is a statement of what you were talking about last time. I think if the kids wanted specifically, again, to continue their questions to you personally, I thought that was very fruitful also last year.
Everybody speak at once now.
I think I'd like to make a comment. One of the comments that Grandpa made was that the Masek Foundation had planted a seed, and I think in each one of us, and in each one of our different realities, there is also a seed, and each one has to give himself to the poverty surrounding him in that reality, to help diminish that problem. So that's kind of like the synthesis that I got from this morning. Would you have any comment on that?
Well, I think we all have a calling, or not really a calling, but we're told to do things. We're told to do charity. It's part of our job. It's where we have been. The Creator has helped provide us. They say that everything that you got, the Creator helped you get. So we have an obligation. That's the obligation. We have an obligation to. It's not that you're just so good because you do some charity. You have an obligation to do it. Does that kind of answer?
Yes.
Well, look at it another way. Speaks of the seed. Seed means growth, then. And just in your own development, your own growth, that's the, brings the fruition of the seed. And if you have those kind of ideals and ideas, why, I think that's the idea from Mass this morning. Your holiness, your wholeness will develop from that instinct that you have, that seed that's there inside you.
I would say one of the things that I'm feeling very appreciative of in that light, and that is that I think that there's a really remarkable way that you've given us permission to allow that seed that's really our seed individually, right, to find its way to the light. That I don't think any of us have a particular pressure to be a particular thing. There's really a remarkable, healthy permission and expectation that you follow that which is in you, that the seed is in you, and that the seed will, with proper nourishment and all that, find its way to the light and to grow. I'm liking the diversity of calls and the diversity of ways that seed comes to fruit.
It's like the yeast in the dough. It just grows.
I remember being very struck when we were going around and each person was talking about what's going on in their lives and perhaps what they're working on for the future at this point in time. And I was just amazed. I mean, if you look at all these people in one family, and I think that there's a great deal of talent and hope for the future, and big dreams and lots of intelligence and talent to go along with it. And I think it's definitely evidence of it's genetic and also parenting that you've done, and the tremendous amount of work that you've done. And I would hope that we can all, along with the privileges of talents that we've been given through our parents and through you, that we can also take on some of the responsibilities that you've spoken about this morning and in the past, especially work through the foundation and however that will be through our own lives and what we're working in. So I hope that we can all take on the responsibility as well as the privileges and talents that we've been given.
Nice job.
Well, since this is a question and answer time, I'd like to just get into the meat of the subject. I have this question that I've always wanted to ask from grandma, and generally want to ask these kind of questions to people with the graying hair, although they're not the only ones here. And that is, what drove you through life? What is your motivation? What is your, as they say in French, raison d'être, the reason you're here? It's a really difficult question to ask.
Are you talking about financial?
Okay, for instance, the Masek Foundation seems to be something that's really important for you. It seems, at one point you said, well, you come and go on Earth, and at least this will be here, and I really hope it'll continue. It seems like you really attach a lot of importance to that, and that a good deal of your life is geared towards that. It seems to be an accomplishment, a final step, but I don't know.
Well, that's true to some extent, Chris. But also the thought of the foundation is that, let's say that you donated $10,000 to Food for the Poor, and that went into beans, and it is gone. The idea of the foundation is that you put that $10,000 in the foundation, and let's say that on the average time that we'll draw off 10% interest. Since there's no taxes on it, that makes $1,000 a year. That could go for 100 years, or $100,000, or into the future almost indefinitely, which is just a thought of a way of doing something. Not necessarily, sure, we all like to leave something that stays after us, but I don't know that that's so as important as what the accomplishments are of what you do. And the fact that, there were some people in church today that have donated to the foundation. The fact that it was started and more people put money in, and if we can get more people interested in the foundation, then the $10,000 that one person might put in can grow to be $100,000 put in and produce the same $10,000 each year. That answer your...
Yeah, and how about otherwise before then? What did your children drive you through life? What made you go along the way you did? That's a way to put it.
Crazy.
I'll try to answer it in this way. We were born and grew up in poverty. We didn't know it. Not the kind of poverty that they had in Haiti. We had food. But our folks, we didn't have electricity. We didn't have water in the house. We didn't have heat in the house. We didn't have air conditioning. We were quite happy with it though, but I did see people that had a lot of those things in the cities. We were on a farm. No farms had them. We were just like the rest of the farmers. It was poverty, but we just didn't realize it. In some way, I had instilled in me that I and my kids weren't going to live that way. But I think that was the biggest driving force that I had was that. And
Why not if you were happy?
Hmm?
Why not if you were happy?
well, I can't say, when you're happy while you're done, you quit, you settle down, you don't go any further. And one of the things that the whole family done was, as we went out in the world and made money, we sent money to our folks who did finally have water in the house and electricity and all those things that people had as time went on. So I think we thought a lot about doing it for them too.
So part of the drive was to bring your livelihood to some material well-being that reached a certain standard.
Right.
That was a drive of its own.
Also, there was no way that I could go back to, as we said in the pictures 5 years ago. I went through the 8th grade. There was no way I could even go to high school because we lived quite a ways out of town. And we'd had to drive horses or some way to get to high school. And college I wasn't even thought about college. In the teens, for most kids, didn't go to college. Right? So I wanted to be sure that my kids could go to college if they wanted to. Which was another ambition that's worked out. That was why the original educational foundation was set up. To see that the older ones had gotten through, but the younger ones, something might happen to us and they might not get through. So there was money coming in from the foundation, the educational foundation, to see to it that if they wanted their education, they would have it.
One of the things that I just want to add, in case some people aren't aware of that, I just want this to be recorded too, is that when we were growing up, I know that there wasn't ever an excess of things. And somebody told me somewhere along the way that my dad was one of the richest men in town. And I think I was the last to know that. But there was as we were growing up, I mean, I guess you were, but I don't think there was ever an indulgence in excessiveness, so that the Franciscans talked about poverty as the exactly right amount, not too much and not too little. I mean, that's poverty, in the sense of the virtue of poverty is having it just right.
That what you need to support your essential life.
Then I don't know who told you about us being rich. Those stories go back when I went back east. I had married a rich girl out in this country.
Oh, good.
See there.
And
She was.
And on the other hand, she married me for my money. But when we were married, we were rich. When we were married, I had $300 in the bank with a total amount of cash available. And I was getting a terrific salary of $35 a week. Now that would scare you today, but $35 a week, you were rich at $35 a week. We bought a house, made payments, bought furniture, had children. We done it on $35 a week, had cars. So we were rich, but not the way that you would think that we were rich.
You had cars. You had a car.
A car, right.
And I used to struggle to find a way to get the kids to catechism, because if you needed the car, I couldn't have the car. And if I had the car, all the neighbors wanted to go with us because they didn't have cars. But anyway, the thing that we really patterned our life on there was that you should live simply that you may have to give to him who is in need, which is an admonition probably in one of the wisdom books in the Bible that has really stayed with me always. And I see the nuns living that way. They live simply and then they give. just because people need it. And that's part of loving God and your fellow man.
And my dad had a saying, which was sort of, and you've heard probably many times, waste not, want not. You've heard it too. And,
We've heard it a
to-
lot. We've heard it a lot.
to this day, I will follow you kids around and shut lights off. Because
Do you know what I do now? I shut the curtains, I close the doors, I lock the doors before it gets dark. Where I live. I learned it from you. And I'm glad.
I go around my house, we always have somebody living with us, and I'm always turning off the lights all around the house.
when
So
you,
we're all compulsive light turn offers now.
you will probably find this that turning off the lights doesn't make that much difference. But of the 101,000 things in your life that you can learn to do make a big difference. In that there's so much waste in a lot of things, and I don't think you should really have the privilege of wasting those things. I would still rather stay in a $25 motel and give $25 to charity than to stay in a $50 motel, even if the $25 motel wasn't as good as the $50 one. I feel better about it.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
think, honey, I want to interrupt. Thinking of the waste thing is coming home to the American people right now, or all over the world, and that Cassandra can speak to that, to the ecology thing, the waste of the natural resources and the waste of the energy that has been given to us, that future generations are going to have to suffer because of the greed and the profligacy of the present people on earth.
I thought about you a lot when they turned our water off in Lake County.
That's I never miss the water till the well runs dry.
No, I just realized how spoiled we've been this whole generation, how we've not gone through any wars or depressions, or it's not that we've had a completely easy time, but most of our bad times have been like psychologically rather than materially.
Yeah.
And it just having to not be able to take showers is like, God, I never made it through the depression. I just thought of you guys when you.
Our swimming
growing
pool
up.
was the irrigation ditch.
Ours was a tub. We didn't have irrigation ditches. We had a tub.
Was that the one for the cows or the one in the house?
No, it served an all purpose.
Did you all take that's what I want to know. Did you take a tub bath, everybody at one right after another in the same tub of water?
This was a Saturday night ritual.
One tub of water for everybody, all 12 kids.
Pretty much. You couldn't see it. You didn't have anything to keep water wet. Not stuff.
So if you come out of the field and you're all muddy, the guy after you, you're not a muddy man.
Wasn't quite that bad. No. You had a basin of water. You went out and pumped the water out of the ground, brought it in. You heated the tequila water if you wanted warm water. Mostly you washed in cold. And you were able to wash your hands and face, and then with a washcloth you could wash the rest of you in one little basin of water, which is a privilege that some people in this world don't even have now. Water is life.
Well, it's really good to undergo hardships because it really makes you appreciate things. I mean, just like Mary Louise going to Nova Scotia and going through all of her flea things. Even as just 5 years back when we went to Fiji, we didn't have showers or anything there. That's how we take our showers. And the mosquitoes are eating us up from one end to another. It really did take away a lot of superficiality and get down to the crux of things.
I think that was something about this morning that was really, it was very special because, you know, when Joseph was speaking about that particular time when you went down, you had never seen that kind of poverty before. You know, it's like really getting down to the nitty gritty. This is what life is. This is what life is. Before, it's like basic life. You know, yeah, the basics. Getting down. Yeah. To really find out what is essential, what is the real value that I want to find, you know, for yourself. You know, but then for the two of you, you know, that's what you've always done. It's like that's you yourselves have always done that, and I think that that's been the gift to each of us, because then, you know, as Phyllis was speaking about that permission to do that, you know, and the expectation that we would find that which is, you know, how do we become the most efficacious, you know, how do we act, you know.
How do you become all that you can become?
Right.
Because we're not really here. We're always becoming. We never are finished as long as there's life on it. We live on this earth.
I wonder if all of you understand and appreciate all the things Joe does. Joe does so much work with Share the Harvest, which has been a great thing. But you don't know how much work he's done with Anthony, too, which we didn't feel like, in fact, we were a little scared of Anthony, and we didn't feel like we wanted to be too close to him, because we had him here for a while, and we didn't want him living with us. Joe has worked with him and worked hard to get finances lined up through Social Security and so forth to take care of Anthony, and he has really no good reason to do it except because he's charitable and good-hearted. Then on a deal like this 50-50 deal here, you can see the organization. We didn't do any of it. Joe has done everything in the organization of it.
That's why it wasn't very well
And
organized.
it's one awful lot of work.
Let's get Joe on tape right now. I can do it.
Joe, I thought it was well organized in the sense that I was real impressed last time. I mean, you had everything mapped out like.
Joe, come sit down for a minute. Yeah, how do I do it? I've done it before. We have a video camera. You just have to not move it very fast.
I don't have to zoom in. I don't have to zoom in anywhere, do
Joe,
I?
so you're in this document. Being talked about.
I thought that it was well organized this time. Not in the same way as before, where you really had it very structured and focused or whatever. But I think that the structure this time allowed a flow of people that was very appropriate and different from before. But to repeat the same thing wouldn't have been as good.
My focus this time is on being together rather than doing things, which I think is partly a change in focus of you. You do a lot of things, but there's also more being and being together. Amy, that's right.
It's all very hard on egos. A big part of me, and probably everybody wants to swell up with that.
Well, don't discourage these younger ones. They've got to grow into that before they can give out. They have to have before they can give.
Have a good
So
ego. That's what everybody thinks.
it's important to develop that.
Well, I think they're all doing very well.
And building egos. Healthy egos.
Within this-
Whoa.
Within this stage.
I'd say looking around, Christopher and Joel and Pascal are very well on the way in terms of this first step.
Oh,
Wow.
They're letting egos.
Wait,
More,
more.
Pascal's gonna be Superman.
Raphael and Michael are not too bad. They're just, you know, they try to go by quiet. You know? they come in with a real
Subtle
you know.
Jesuit move.
It's one diplomat recognizing another one.
I bet if I asked you if it was true that when you asked the Jesuit a question, he answered by when you'd say, "Who told you that?"
Any more questions?
Well, this totally degenerates.
Well, since we still have this degenerated mode, I'd like to. Yeah, I do.
That's when
like it.
Chris
This is a fish in the water now. Questions on, there's this old Chinese technique, and since we're on tape, this will be fun, to determine how a person is. So what you do is you ask someone, for instance, if you were an animal, which animal would you be? And so on. And I'd really be interested in seeing how you react to this. So Grandpa and Grandma, first question, if you were an animal each, which one would you be?
But the problem with that is, you can't ever name yourself as an animal.
We have
Somebody else
to name.
has to.
Oh, you want us to do it?
We have to do it.
Well, we'll let them give their
That's
opinion,
Okay.
but
That's
Go for it.
Well, I suppose that if I was an animal, I have two big tigers in my office on the wall, so I would probably be a tiger.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's a
Grandma?
very esoteric animal.
How about
That
Grandma?
would be as good as any that I can think of.
That's something I'd have to think about a long time because I can't imagine having any of those traits. I wasn't that familiar with a lot of animals. I could see when I was growing up. I could see my brother being a donkey or a pig.
You called it a donkey then?
and and I could see people, somebody acting like an old cow, or somebody being a pussycat, or something like that. But that was the way we related to the animals. Just the particular traits that we would notice in.
Let's get some response over here. What do you think? I don't know. I'd see Grandma's a dove, first one.
What?
A dove.
question right there.
Except
What?
I think I'm not one of the children, but I think there's something so maternal that I hesitate at naming a bird because they're not particularly, they're often not maternal, but doves are, as birds go. But something.
Thank you.
Now, Grandpa, if you were a drink.
Ah!
A drink. Come on.
Great.
A drink. A drink. D-R-I-N-K.
Scotch.
First you were an animal, now if you were a drink, what drink would you be?
It's gotta be Scotch.
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 It's Scotch.
Probably have to be Scotch, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And water.
Scotch and water,
Scotch and water.
yeah.
On the rocks
With
or no?
ice. Huh?
On the rocks.
Scotch.
Only if their grandchildren are Why Scotch and water? I mean, well.
Well, you know the reputation of the Scotch.
Okay.
So mother.
You're on.
Oh, I haven't been thinking along those lines. I didn't sleep well last night, but I got to thinking a lot about Grandma Desi, and that this thing doesn't go only just back to Fred and Margaret. It goes on back and back and back and back. Just as each one of your families can think of the tradition in your family or the thing in your family that comes down through generation after generation.
That's something, the word tradition. This is going to take it off the subject here.
It's okay.
It's like at least for my own mind, my own wee mind. I often think of who said that? I often think of the word tradition and think, oh, it sounds so closed, so tight, tradition. And it's not. It's something that's really, it's alive. Tradition is, it's a part, it is that. It's like that.
Evolves.
Yeah.
It stabilizes.
Yeah.
It's a living tradition.
think there's any more tradition if there isn't any more
Whoa! Wow!
love. So anyhow, it has to survive. That's what I know.
Great proposal. That was a document. Wow.
Good, let's see.
I have another sort of big question for Grandma and Grandpa, but I think it's kind of personal.
The drink.
Oh, the drink. Sorry.
Oh, that's enough.
I wanna know.
Let's X out the drink.
What's that?
We don't want to know what drink Grandma is.
Oh,
She
okay.
already said water, so.
Oh,
Water.
that's true.
Yes.
Water's nice.
My question is, I think because I have still hasn't been beaten out of me yet, a romantic notion of marriage, and for me, 55 years is really amazing. And I think, I don't know how to ask it, but I want to know how you did it. Like how, I mean, I remember seeing last night, Grandma said that it's sacrifice, that, that's a big part of it, and, learning to give as well as to take. And I guess I just wondered whether you had more to say on that. What makes a marriage last 55 years? And be so good.
Tradition.
I don't know what makes one last 55 years. The grace of God, maybe.
Perseverance.
According to McEntee, who you all know, he has threatened to divorce his wife several times. And she always says, Mac, anytime you think you can afford it, go do it. Maybe that has something to do with making you stick together.
Oh, that's a big joke.
Yeah, it's really, that's
On a serious level.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of respect for one another, a lot of liking for one another. There's a lot of trust in one another. The fact that you know the character and the thinking of one another, and then a lot of prayer, because there's times when there's difference of opinion, duplicated many times, and but a respect for each other's ideas, and then a willingness to each of you go 90% of the way, and sometimes 100, and it goes back and forth. Sometimes it's just a patient thing too, that you know that there's a goodness in that person, that God created them to be what they were to be, and you really can't change that. You have to respect it. Joe can probably tell you a lot more about what makes a marriage work, because he's been to marriage encounter.
But he doesn't have 55 years.
He's working on it.
He's working on it.
You don't.
He's
You only
made
live
that
it.
turn.
You only live it one day at a time.
Lots more experience. Alan is 25.
I was going to ask Grandma and Grandpa, I have some perceptions, but our perceptions as children, I think, related to where we were at various times. When were the rockiest times in your marriage?
this morning.
You don't count those. You live through, work them out, and go for the good times, and then when
But
you
he's
hit another rock in the road, why?
He's asking historically, though.
Yes, I'm asking
I
He's
questions.
really asking a historical question. When were they? Because the kids went through them too.
Yeah.
You're asking as a kid, having gone through them, but not necessarily being privy to what they were working out with themselves.
Probably a different time for each one of us. I remember having a lot of soul searching to do when Father Cremeyer was here. So that was right soon after Kathy was born. I remember having a real rocky time when Phyllis was a baby. I think the war had as much to do with that as personal things, but just the fact that it was difficult for each of us to meet the demands of that kind of a time, and the support I thought I should get from my husband was going to the war effort, and I'm sure that he struggled with the fact that he was focused on this one thing, and here's all these little kids around the minute he came home, and they were making a racket and making a fuss and needed rest. And that was one of the times I would just say that there's different kinds of rocky times too. Part of them are personal things, personality things, and part of them are principled things, the cultural things that you bring from your own family, and they all have to meet together. And really, the kids growing up and the things that they brought back to mom and dad, their insights into what was going on in the world, their knowledge of just personalities, they would be able to come home and say something to us that would help us see what our problem was. I can remember Annie coming home and telling me, "Mother, Kathy is the most spoiled kid in this town, and everybody knows it but you."
Amen. I know I was. Whoa, and I loved it.
It made me take another look at what was going on in my relationships. I don't know when Daddy's hard times were because he never talked about that. He might get mad and go out of the door and slam it until I thought it was going to fall off. He might not talk to me for 3 days at a time.
Took it out on the fish.
I remember. I remember when I was young, there was one time at the kitchen table, and you were fighting. And I'm sure this was probably something totally normal to do. And I was just sitting there going, I can't take this. And I said, don't fight anymore. I don't know what I said, but it was like, I couldn't take it. It was like the intensity of that struggle that was going on. I just said, and it was like then there was just this silence. I thought, oh no, this is worse than it was before.
Fight.
Dad, when were your worst times?
Probably the 40s, during the war struggle. It seemed like there was such a demand on everybody, especially on people that could work 20 hours a day, that it upset your whole routine of life. When you were home, when you tried to sleep, you couldn't sleep because you were operating 24 hours a day, wondering when somebody's going to get scalded with hot water, steam, inferior products for high pressure hoses that were coming out and everything, just carried right on into your home life and the life of the kid, just because you were under such a strain.
So just remember, war doesn't only just affect the combatants, it affects everybody and the whole globe, actually.
Just as a story, we were operating 24 hours a day. 2 o'clock in the morning, they call me up. They say we can't unscrew the big nuts off the mold that has the tire in it. I couldn't understand why. I went down, took a wrench and it was tight. I said, "Did you let the air out of the tire?" "Oh no." If they had been able to unscrew the nuts and blown them to kingdom come. But they were under a strain too. They were working long hours, working through the night. And just forgot little details that were terrific to do.
Where was that you were doing that? Was that right down at the store?
Yes.
Wow.
On top of that, everything, all the material you got was rationed. All the tires that you could recap were rationed. You could only do record keeping. It's out of this world. And we didn't even have a computer. Somewhere in the shed out there above are hundreds and hundreds of receipts for tire capping that people had. If there's any value to them ever, there should be.
Ration tickets, huh?
Right. The mice didn't eat them all. There's a lot of them up there in the shed up above, stuck way back from the boarding.
You know, since this video may be shown to people long after we're gone, if the videotape lasts, one of the things that I think it's important to record is that both of you grew up on farms. We didn't grow up on a farm, and yet I think such a part of our life was knowing each of you working with the earth as a part of whatever that other rhythm was, and us doing that with you. I mean, I remember as a little bitty kid, Mom in her flower garden, and I remember as a bigger kid, everybody up at 6 in the morning to get out and weed the strawberries or pick the raspberries or get the corn irrigated or whatever. And I think that is something so tangibly important in how we are and how we know ourselves, that we grew up knowing ourselves in relationship to the earth, and that though we weren't farmers per se, we're all farmers in many ways.
If I could pick up on that a little bit and then maybe ask a question, I very much feel the same way. I feel like while we were not farmers, our parents were, and we really partook of that. I think we had our feet on the ground. We were in a farming community where everything was based that way, to where everything we heard, our way of thinking was farm-based, had its feet on the ground. And I feel, for example, like my children do not have that. They are not in that environment. They don't have a feeling with it. I feel like your children are the same. And I'm kind of interested in Cassandra and Michael and in what they've done and how they perceive what we're talking about as far as this closeness to the earth. And do you feel like you didn't have it and you got something? I'd like to hear your perception on this closeness to the earth that Grandma and Grandpa started with, that we're saying we partake of, and that I see the next generation doesn't have, maybe except you, in what you live, both of you.
I found it a very valuable experience, and one of the key things that I've seen in Grandpa is a sense of determination, a sense of discipline, and tremendous responsibility. I think these are one of the more important things that I learned during my year in Connecticut and in Germany. When you're taking care of animals, there's a responsibility placed on you for the lives of those animals. And at the beginning, it was difficult to assume that responsibility because to me they were just a bunch of cows. But as time went on, each one of those cows took on a very, there was a love that developed. And each cow had a particular value to me. So that initially, that sense of discipline, of getting up really early in the morning, and sometimes working really late at night, that sense of responsibility of being aware of what is going on with each one of these lives. And this developed throughout the year from an initial very limited awareness of any of that, or any sense of responsibility or obligation, to coming to a stage where I loved taking that responsibility and seeing to it that they had their needs met. And I think that is one of the things that I see most reflected in Grandma and Grandpa's life. That there's always been that sense of responsibility for each one of your children to see that they went to college and had a good upbringing. Definitely also a sense of great love. So that I think that is what one can learn from, or what I have learned from working with the land.
I guess it was interesting that you would ask it, because I always think that for me it's such a personal bias. I mean, that I love the work, and so I don't expect that other people should have to, that if they don't respond to it, that they would want to do it. But I do, I've seen other people who aren't, it's not their thing, but we have to, go through that process, and it's an amazing experience, because it's something that you get to know yourself better, because you're bouncing off creation. If you see, I've fallen flat on my face, I've failed miserably, I've killed things, whatever it is, you do those as well as the good things, but there's a way that you can come to know yourself through creation. And I'm not, there's been a lot of talk about religion and a lot of talk about God, and I'm not particularly, I don't have a real good sense of that, but I have a sense of creation, and I think it's through that I have any sense of what God is, just because of the beauty of that. And I think on a more personal, and maybe not a more personal point of view, it's that it's physical labor. It's your body in relation to the wind, and I don't think there's anything like it. You can lift weights, or you can, whatever it is that you do, but there's something when it's connected to the work. You're creating food. I guess it gets back to what Joe was saying, that it's the basics. You're making food, you're milking cows, that milk is going, it's making cheese, and food is the essence. When you come down to it, that's the most basic thing. I had a...
Except for water, of course.
That's right, sorry. And physics. I had a funny experience of, I was taking courses at Dartmouth, and then I would run, and I had to be at work in less than the amount of time that it took to drive as far as there. So I would slip into a bathroom and quickly change into my farm clothes and then go milk 200 cows. And you look for a phone booth, but they don't have. It's just the experience. The contrast is what I'm trying to say. That there's to go from one world to the other world. There are totally different realities, and there's really something missing at Dartmouth. I have a quote pinned up on my wall of one of the kids talking about having to work in one of the food places, distributing, just as a cashier or making food to prepare for the students. And he says, it's not really attractive work. It's manual labor working with food. And I thought, what? How do you intend to live if you're not gonna admit that food has a real part of it? So for me, I think the connection is the body. It's physical. And to me, you wonder why people have so many physical troubles. There's so much emphasis kept on losing weight and all this, and you wouldn't have to go to a spa if you throw a few bales, or and it would be a little more productive. I don't know. I'm getting off the track right now. That and the essence of that it's food, and I guess that connects real strongly. I come here and I think I look at this land and I try to figure out what the connection is. Like where does that mean? When you said about a deer, that a deer was like a milk cow. How could you shoot it?
Why didn't I like to hunt deer?
Right.
Because it made me feel like shooting a deer was like shooting the old milk cow. Little realization probably as years go by that you children have of the amount of time that your mother put in with catechisms and so forth and the teaching that she gave each individual one of you, the hours and hours and hours that were spent to teach you about God and the church and along those lines. It's you'd have to live with it like I did to know that each one of you, in your own life. Remember, there were 7 of you, and she went through all of this with each one of you. And individually, she taught you hour after hour. And I think that's something we should not be forgotten.
It's a different kind of feeding. It's a different kind of feeding.
we often talk. Sometimes it's much easier to work with people who are not Catholic because they're much more. Because they're much more open to, what it's really about. Because those people who say that they're Catholic think that they know what Catholicism is, and I think this is not. I'm not saying because you really did know, what it was, but like I think with Mother as having come from the Methodist background, and that you had, and then coming into that knowledge of the Catholicism yourself, it's like that must have been such a gift. It's a gift to us, because you so knew exactly what you believed, and exactly what, or I don't know if that's true. I mean, I'm here. I am projecting, but it's like for me, I know with the people that we work with, who are of different religions, and they absolutely have a much clearer picture of what's going on than those who are Catholic, in the parish church. I mean, there's a real education that needs to happen with those people in the parish church, or that they don't get. It's not available, in whatever way that is, which is it's another kind of poverty. But these people who come from completely wild places, they get this picture and they can really understand. It's just but I think with that when you taught that catechism, you had such a grounding. Sorry.
Anything you want to say
You
after?
want me to respond to that?
No, just your viewing of the tape last night. Maybe is there anything that you wanted to correct, erase?
No, I wouldn't take anything back that was on the tape. And I think I learned as much about catechism from teaching catechism to my kids as that was probably where I got my grounding, was just the basic things that the children needed. And it is a gift. Faith is a gift that we don't any of us deserve. It's a free gift that God gives us, and He never takes it back. He's always there with the answers to what we ask if we just wait long enough to get the answers.
I know this is something. And that's to Mother too, and that's not about yesteryears, but it's about the now years. One thing that I've been struck by is what kind of openness you've had to us, especially us who have left the Catholic Church and then whatever else we had to do, and your openness in receiving what we have brought you about, what our life is about, rather than just clamping off. And I really appreciated that over the years.
Amen.
If you're on me, I've run out of saying, but it seems that the thinking always is that if you have anything, you should give everything away. You cannot give anything, take anything out unless you have put something in. You can't be charitable if you have nothing to be charitable with. And you can't be charitable with anything unless you have saved something and built something that produces.
You have to have a body. To be body given, you have to have a body.
And when you have that, then you have an obligation to be charitable. You have some obligation to yourself, I think, too, to see that you aren't starving or damaging your body by malnutrition or something, as long as you can afford it. But when you have built up something, then you have an obligation to be charitable.
I just wanted to say one more thing, and that kind of ties in what you just said with what Alan was asking Cassandra about this whole cultural cultural poverty in this country. It's when you have the riches, you kind of glom onto them, and that makes you self-possessed, which makes you completely unhappy. And the happiness comes from actually maybe it doesn't matter whether your kids go and work on farms, but it does matter your kids put out, in some way. Like I was touched even for a small example of Pascal taking Kikuyu and taking her to the line and getting me dinner last night. I know a lot of places where I would